Welcome back everybody, my name is Tucker, and in today's video I want to talk about some teams that could be making some huge moves in the 2019 NBA offseason that nobody's really talking about, because we all know that there's going to be a good amount of player movement this offseason. There could potentially be an Anthony Davis trade, Kyrie Irving, Jimmy Butler, Kevin Durant, Kawhi Leonard, all these guys are up and could be moving in free agency, but it's not just the Lakers, it's not just the Knicks, it's not just the Clippers that could potentially be making moves. There are other NBA teams that have cap space, that have tradable assets, that could be making some big moves that need to be talked about, and that's what I'm going to do in today's video. Starting off, the first team on the list is the Milwaukee Bucks. Now, fair warning, this is going to be the longest-winded section of the entire video, just because there's some small little salary cap intricacies that I need to lay out and explain that are going to be relevant throughout the video, so just stick with me through this part, and then the rest of it won't be as long. So initially, when you look at the Milwaukee Bucks basketball reference contracts page, it says that they have about $91 million in payroll for next season, and that gives them about $17 million in salary cap space. However, George Hill only has a $1 million guarantee for his 2019-20 contract, and he will likely be cut, and that will save the Bucks around $17 million. And along with that, Chris Middleton has a player option for next season that he will almost assuredly decline, and that will allow the Bucks to have about $61 million in salary, or $48 million in salary cap space. However, and this is the part that's going to relate to a couple of other teams on this list, 4 teams like the Bucks that have a lot of upcoming free agents. Just because their contract is expiring doesn't mean they don't impact that team's payroll for that offseason. And the reason for that is, even though these players' contracts are expiring, they still have a cap hold on that team's payroll. Now, what a cap hold is it allows the initial team, in this case the Bucks, to withhold that player's bird rights and be able to re-sign them and go over the cap, but their payroll isn't just completely off the books when their contract expires. They have to release that cap hold in order to fully have that space and sign other players, or they keep the cap hold and then that allows them to go over the cap. And the amount of that cap hold is 150% of what that player made the prior year, and because of that, the Bucks don't actually have any cap space for the summer of 2019 right now, assuming they keep all of these cap holds on the books. As you can see on this side of the screen, they have a lot of players that are upcoming free agents that are important to their team, those being Chris Middleton, Eric Bledsoe, Brook Lopez, Malcolm Brogdon, and also Nikola Mirotic. And when you put all of their cap holds together, that's $68 million in total that the Bucks need to deal with before they can have any salary cap space at all. Now, to be clear, if they released every single one of their players from their cap hold, they would have all of that $48 million in salary cap space, but they wouldn't be able to go over the cap to re-sign any of these players, and that gives them a couple of options. The first of which is that they keep the cap hold for Chris Middleton and Malcolm Brogdon, because in my opinion, there's no way that those two guys are going to be playing elsewhere other than Milwaukee next season, and they release the hold on Eric Bledsoe, Brook Lopez, and Nikola Mirotic, and that would give them about $26 million in salary cap space to go get another player around Giannis, Middleton, and Malcolm Brogdon. Now, the trade-off of this would be, would the new player or players that they sign in free agency be enough to make up for the loss of the 3 players that they got rid of, or at least release the cap hold of, because once they sign new players, they wouldn't be able to go over the salary cap to re-sign any of the 3 guys they released the cap hold on. Option 2 would be to re-sign all of the players that I mentioned that are upcoming free agents and basically run it back next year with the exact same roster that they have this season, and the only way that they would really be able to improve their roster would be with whoever they would bring in with the mid-level exception, because they don't have their 2019 draft pick. Option 3, which is extremely unlikely but is still a minor possibility, is that the Bucks get rid of all of their cap holds. They have $48 million in salary cap space. They try and bring in a max player plus another guy to surround Giannis with as much talent as possible, but again, they wouldn't be able to bring back any of those 5 free agents. And really, for the Bucks, all of this depends on how the playoffs go this season, and it's probably going to end up being some combination of options 1 and 2, depending on how viable some of these players are in the postseason. Again, I think Brogdon and Middleton are almost guaranteed to play for the Bucks next season and sign new deals this offseason, but those other 3 guys, Bledsoe, Mirotic, and Lopez, could potentially end up being minor or big liabilities in the postseason, and if that's the case, then the Bucks might end up releasing them from their cap hold and using their salary cap space to try and bring in some other guys that might work a little bit better. But it's just a really interesting scenario, because if they bring back all of these guys this offseason, then they're basically rolling with this core moving forward for the entirety of Giannis's contract. And if it doesn't work out, or guys get hurt, or guys don't progress, then he could become unhappy by the time his contract is over. So again, it's probably going to end up being some combination of options 1 and 2, but they do have the flexibility to make some big moves. And if they do create some salary cap space, either whether it be max space by getting rid of all their cap holds or just releasing those 3 guys that I talked about, they could target any number of free agents. Next up now, the second team on the list is in a similar situation to the Milwaukee Bucks, and that's the Indiana Pacers. They also have a ton of free agents coming up in the 2019 offseason, although their guys are not necessarily as significant to their team as some of the players that the Bucks have as 2019 free agents. Those 5 guys and their cap holds are on screen here, but they're Thaddeus Young, Tyreke Evans, Bogdan Bogdanovic, Darren Collison, and Corey Joseph. Now, option 1, if they release all of those cap holds, which isn't necessarily unlikely, because those 5 guys, even though each of them have a good amount of importance to their team, they're not incredibly significant to the point that they would need to bring them back. But if they did release all those guys from their cap holds, they'd have $51 million in salary cap space this offseason to try and make as many moves as they wanted to. Similar targets to what I just talked about with the Bucks. Maybe they could bring in D'Angelo Russell, maybe Eric Bledsoe, maybe Julius Randle, maybe even someone like Jimmy Butler as a max level player, even though that fit would be pretty questionable with him and Victor Oladipo, depending on Oladipo's health. They at least have a ton of flexibility and a ton of options. Option 2 would be to keep the cap hold on and re-sign the guy that's probably the most valuable to them of all those free agents, and that's Bogdanovic, and they'd still have a significant amount of cap space to go and make some other moves after re-signing him. And ideally, they'd end up with a point guard, again, like maybe D'Angelo Russell, maybe like Eric Bledsoe, to bring in place of guys like Darren Collison and Corey Joseph to really give Oladipo a little bit more playmaking help and surround him with a little bit more of an offensive force in the backcourt, while he can still focus on being a great two-way player to make up for some of the deficiencies of someone like D'Angelo Russell. Option 3 would really just be a combination of a few different things, possibly trading one of their talented young bigs in Sabonis or Turner and trying to get them some guard and wing help that way, releasing any number of their cap holds or all of them really to bring in some guard and wing help around Oladipo. This is really just a combination of things, a combination of those cap holds, in addition to potentially making a trade with one of their bigs to just create a different team around Oladipo and potentially a more talented one. But in the end, all of this really depends on Victor Oladipo's health. How healthy is he? How healthy he's going to be for the 2019-20 season? And at least this team has given themselves a ton of flexibility, and Oladipo is on a very good contract for them moving forward. And if they don't feel like he's going to be 100% healthy for next season, they could always just roll over this cap space until next season. They could just sign one-year deals and they can continue to move forward because they don't really have anybody else to pay for a little bit. Sabonis, they have another year of his rookie deal. Turner's already been re-signed. Oladipo's on a long-term deal. So they could always just roll over this cap space if they wanted to. Number 3 on the list is the team that probably has the most up in the air in terms of what they're going to do in the 2019 offseason of any of the teams on this list, and that's the Dallas Mavericks. Now, initially, they're going to have about $55 million in payroll, which is about $54 million in cap space in the 2019 offseason. And for them, cap holds are not as big of an issue as they are for the first 2 teams, because really the only significant guys are JJ Barea, Dirk, and then Dorian Finney-Smith. But the big deal here for the Mavericks is what to do about Kristaps Porzingis and what he is going to do, and what he decides to do with his 2019 restricted free agency has a ton to do with what the Mavs can do this year or this summer or next year or next summer. So there's a couple of different options. If Kristaps Porzingis does sign the qualifying offer for this offseason, then that would mean that the Mavericks would have full max contract level space, and Kristaps Porzingis would be a 2020 unrestricted free agent. That would release him from his restricted free agency. He would play on a qualifying offer deal, and the Mavericks would have full max contract space this summer to try and sign whoever they wanted to. The other option for Porzingis, and something that I think is more likely given the injury that he's coming off of, is that he signs a max level rookie scale contract extension, and the Mavericks wouldn't have max level contract space in terms of salary cap space, but they would have a lot of space anyway, about $25+ million, even with re-signing Kristaps to a significant near max extension. Now, the problem with all this in terms of me making a video on it is everything is so up in the air and there's so little info about what the Mavericks want to do with KP, what KP wants to do with his contract, and what little info we do have is pretty conflicting. So all of it depends on what he's going to do, but in the end, no matter what, the Mavs are going to have significant space to try and make moves this offseason, whether KP signs the qualifying offer, whether he doesn't. They have the space to bring in significant players in free agency, and I would be really intrigued if Porzingis does end up taking the qualifying offer and the Mavs have a full max contract slot staring them in the face, which it seems like they've had for a couple of years. They haven't really been able to bring in anybody that's all that big of a name, but it would certainly be an intriguing possibility for a free agent with Doncic, Porzingis, and then whoever the third guy is. The last now is a team that I have had my eye on for this kind of video for really a year and a half now, and that is the Utah Jazz, because they have continually been one of the smarter teams in the league in terms of their salary cap flexibility, the kind of contracts that they sign, and have positioned themselves to be a really interesting team, not only this season, but moving forward. So initially, it looks like the Jazz would have about $92 million in payroll for the summer of 2019, which is about $17 million in salary cap space, but there are two significant players that are going to impact that number a lot, and those are Derek Favors and Ricky Rubio. Favors is in a similar situation to George Hill that I talked about with the Milwaukee Bucks, and that he has a non-guaranteed deal for next season, and if the Jazz cut him, which they will, it would save them $16 million in payroll. And then for Rubio, he is a 2019 free agent with about a $22 million salary cap hold. And so if the Jazz did end up getting rid of Favors and they released Rubio from his cap hold, they'd have about $76 million in payroll, which is right at max salary cap space at about $33 million, and they could create a few more million if they wanted to by getting rid of a few other guys' cap holds. And so they'd have pretty similar options to what the Indiana Pacers had earlier. They could get rid of Rubio and Favors and look for an upgrade at the point guard position, potentially a max contract level upgrade. Again, D'Angelo Russell is a guy to look at someone that's maybe less than a max contract player, certainly maybe in Eric Bledsoe signing. They still need more spacing. They need help at the 4 spot, especially if they get rid of Favors, but they would have max contract level space. I don't necessarily think they'd be able to get a max contract level player, but having that kind of flexibility is hugely important for a team like the Jazz. And if they didn't find anybody that they really wanted this offseason, they could always roll over that cap space until 2020, because they have one more year. In the summer of 2020 is the last time that they can have real significant cap space with Donovan Mitchell still on his rookie deal, because after that, they're going to have to give him a ton of money, and it becomes more difficult. So if they want to build a championship level team in the offseason with free agency, with trades, with salary cap flexibility, it would have to happen in this coming summer of 2019 or 2020, and they've built themselves an opportunity to be able to do that again with their salary cap flexibility and a max contract level spot this summer if they make the correct moves moving forward. But there you have it. Those are 5 NBA teams that are overlooked, that nobody's really talking about, but could be making some huge moves in the 2019 NBA offseason. Once again, my name is Tucker. I hope you guys enjoyed the video today. If you missed any of my previous videos, then be sure to check out the boxes on screen. Thanks again, and I'll see you all next time.